appointed time. I should have stopped.
She says there was a lot going on in her life and she felt like she had to hide her condition. As for whether she'll return to the stage, she says she's not sure. Her body will tell her if and when she's ready, according to her. Ahead of the 1-hour primetime special airing tonight at 10 p.m. on NBC this morning, Today has a special preview.
Reporters at the courthouse. I believe we do have a verdict from Ryan Nobles there at the courthouse, Lester.
Yeah, let's go to Ryan right now.
Yeah, that's right, Lester and Laura. We just received this verdict from our reporters inside the courtroom. On count 1, the verdict is guilty. On count 2, the verdict in the Hunter Biden criminal case is guilty. And on count 3, the verdict is guilty. So on all 3 counts, Hunter Biden, the president's son, is found guilty after about 3 hours of deliberation by this jury. He is the first child of a sitting United States president to be found guilty in a criminal case. This probably does not come as a surprise given the length of time that the jury was deliberating and the volume of evidence that these jurors heard, over 6 days worth of testimony. But the verdict here in Wilmington, Delaware, is Hunter Biden found guilty on all 3 counts in this federal criminal trial. Lester.
And Ryan, I'm going to want to walk through those counts with you in a moment, but I think the question on a lot of minds right now hearing this verdict, what is the potential sentence at stake here?
So over the course of all 3 of these different charges, there are different maximum sentences that Hunter Biden could be sentenced to. In 2 of the charges, there is a maximum sentence of 10 years. In one of the other charges, it is a maximum sentence of 5 years. It is unlikely that he will get the maximum sentence on these 3 counts. The judge will have some discretion in terms of sentencing, and it is very likely that he will receive a much reduced sentence given the fact that he is a first-time offender. It's unclear just how long that sentence may be, or if there's even the possibility that there will be jail time at all. That is certainly under the discretion of the judge. But there are 3 separate counts here. They each have 3 different maximum sentences, 2 of them 10 years, 1 of them 5 years. There's also a question of whether or not they would be served consecutively or concurrently. But the chances that he would serve more than a decade in prison are very unlikely. The judge will have that discretion. And given the fact that he is a first-time offender, that's something that we are still waiting to learn exactly how long he may face in jail, if he faces any time at all.
All right. Ryan Nobles, thank you. Let me go back to our senior legal correspondent, Laura Jarrett. Now, Laura, you've had a moment to digest this. What should we be thinking about? What do we know here?
Lester, it's obviously a devastating blow to Hunter Biden and the Biden family, but it's not entirely unexpected as the evidence here was really challenging for the defense. This all stems from Hunter Biden filling out a form that's used essentially almost as a background check when you're trying to purchase a gun. And when he checked the box that said he was not addicted to a controlled substance or not an unlawful user, the government said that that was a lie, Lester, because he was using drugs at the time. And there was a mountain of evidence that came in at trial that he was addicted to crack cocaine. They used his own words. They used text messages. They used his book, audio recordings from him reading from his book, talking about his lengthy history and struggles with abuse over a number of years. The defense had tried to say the government doesn't have any evidence that he actually used drugs on the day that he actually purchased the gun. So how could they prove it? But the government came along and said, look, we don't have to show that he was using the drugs on that very day. All we have to show is that they were using it around that time, and there was plenty of evidence on that score. And clearly on this point, the jury there agreed, Lester, given how quickly they came back with this verdict. Remember, all of this may never have happened if their plea deal had gone forward, but that was sort of scrapped weeks ago, really months ago, after it fell apart under a judge's scrutiny. And so now he is facing potentially a prison sentence. It's going to be entirely up to the judge, as Ryan laid out there. The maximum sentence here, Lester, is 10 years. But the judge could do something far short of that, given that he doesn't have a criminal record. He doesn't have a criminal history. She could do something far less than that, even probation, perhaps. But again, all of this would have gone away completely with no jail time if that plea deal had not fallen apart, Lester.
All right, Laura, thank you. I'll ask you to stand by as well as we bring in NBC News legal analyst Danny Savallo. So, Danny, what are Hunter Biden's options at this point?
At this point, they wait for the sentencing date, which is generally 3 to 4 months out from the conviction. And he'll meet with his probation officer as they prepare the pre-sentence report and start moving towards sentencing, which is generally relatively a short period of time. It can get extended. But from there, after that sentencing date, that is when they file their notice of appeal and start beginning the appellate process, which they undoubtedly will do. But the next steps in this case are proceed to sentencing and argue for a probation-only sentence, which, as Laura pointed out, is a possibility. The sentencing guidelines, roughly calculated, are around 15 to 21 months. But for over a decade now, the United States sentencing guidelines are not mandatory. The judge will calculate them at the sentencing, but ultimately the judge can deviate from them and go below the guidelines, which is likely, although most judges, to ensure that their sentence will not be appealed, will usually stay within the guidelines. A probation-only sentence is a possibility.
All right, Danny, thank you. I want to go back to Ryan Nobles outside the courthouse. Ryan, throughout this trial, we've seen appearances by First Lady Dr. Jill Biden. Is she at the courthouse today?
As a matter of fact, she is, Lester. She just arrived back here at the courthouse just shortly after the verdict was read, so she was not in the courtroom when her son learned his fate. But you're absolutely right. She's been in the courtroom all but one day of this trial. She sat through a lengthy period of jury selection, listening to the jurors being questioned about possibly sitting on this panel. She sat through much of the very grueling, embarrassing, and sometimes heartbreaking testimony from the people that are close associates of Hunter Biden, his former romantic partners, his ex-wife, his ex-girlfriend, Hallie Biden, who is, of course, the widow of Beau Biden, their late son, who was also a romantic partner of Hunter Biden. Jill Biden was there for most of this and listened to that testimony and was there to support Hunter Biden, often embracing him, giving him a kiss as he would either leave or walk into the courtroom. And it's also important to point out that this came at a busy time for the First family. She actually left Wilmington and flew to France to be there for the anniversary of D-Day, was here in Wilmington for just one day, and then flew back to France for the weekend for the official state visit that her husband, President Joe Biden, was a part of, before flying back here to Wilmington to be with Hunter Biden again for this verdict to be read. So she's had a very prominent spot in the courtroom, sitting in the first row every single day. She was sitting at one point with Peter Neal, who is, of course, the husband of Naomi Biden, her granddaughter, who had a very tearful and very powerful testimony as well. And it's also important to point out that that's not something the prosecution ignored. During his closing argument, Leo Wise, the federal prosecutor, part of the federal prosecution team, made note of the fact that there were a number of prominent people in the gallery supporting Hunter Biden, but also making sure the jury understood that they should not be part of their deliberations, that no one is above the law, was the point that Leo Wise made, despite the fact that Joe Biden was in that room every single day. And in addition to Jill Biden, we saw James Biden, who's, of course, the president's brother, Valerie Biden Owens, who is the president's sister, many of them in this courtroom on a day-to-day basis, there to support Hunter Biden throughout this period of time and over the course of this trial. And one other point I want to make, Lester, as we're learning more information as it comes out of the courtroom, is at this point, the judge has not set a sentencing date. That's something that will be set at a later time. So we don't right now know the time frame by which Hunter Biden will learn his fate in terms of sentencing as it relates to this case. Lester.
All right, Ryan, thanks. Let's get the view now from the White House. Senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez is standing by. Gabe, do we expect to hear from the president? We understand he did not want to put his thumb on the scale during the trial, but now that there is a verdict, will he likely speak?
Hi there, Lester. Well, so far, there's no immediate response from the White House or the Biden campaign just yet. But if we do hear from the president shortly, we expect it to be potentially similar to the statement that he gave at the beginning of this trial. And you remember, the president has been very reluctant to weigh in on this case, which, as you said, reluctant to tip the scales here. But at the beginning of this trial, he gave a very heartfelt statement talking about how he's also a dad and that Jill and I love our son. He also brought up that a lot of families have loved ones across the country who have overcome addiction. So it's possible we may hear some type of that sentiment from the president. Lester, it is a bit ironic. In several hours, the president, who is here in Washington, is set to give remarks at a gun safety conference here in D.C. This, of course, as his son has now been convicted of lying on a gun background check form. But as Ryan alluded to, this has been a very difficult time for the Biden family, with Dr. Jill Biden going to and from France and being in the courtroom virtually every day. The president is expected to leave to the G7 summit tomorrow in Italy. But again, we are awaiting comment right now from the White House. We don't have one just yet, Lester.
All right, Gabe, thank you for that. For more on the politics of all this, let's bring in our senior Washington correspondent, Hallie Jackson. Hallie, since the day that Hunter Biden was indicted, this has been an ongoing question of, is this going to be political